Is there anything that you could change or do differently if you could be a high school student now?
I had moved around a lot before we ended up coming to the Beverly Hills School District. And so school for me, like going to so many different schools, was a different experience than most have, right? Because you don't really grow up with the same kids in the same environment. What would I do differently? I would do 1,000 things differently. I was not a good person in high school. I think going through my teenage years was a tough time for me. I think I was a horrible person. I think I could have treated people a lot better.
Hi, my name is Romeo. I'm a junior and a peer counselor. Today's show is about becoming a Norman. I'm so honored to co-host the first episode of the Season 4 podcast. Can you please tell us about yourself and about your La La Land Cafe?
I'm Francois Rehani. I'm the founder and CEO of La La Land. About La La Land Kind Cafe, we started 4 years ago. The background on the cafe was before the cafe started, we had our nonprofit, which is called the We Are One Project, that was helping foster kids age out of foster care, right? So when a kid was turning 18, they had no parents, and they were going to be put out on the street. We wanted to help those kids find therapy, housing, mentorship, job placement. And we were running that nonprofit for about a year. It wasn't working very well because most of the time, most of our youth couldn't get a job. And so that problem ended up creating La La Land so we could create the place where we could actually create a program to give these youth jobs and share that program with other companies. And so the name La La Land came from wanting to create this heavenly place where you felt a genuine sense of happiness, and also a perfect place to give youth who were aging out of foster care jobs.
That's amazing, because I think that a lot of these kids who age out of the foster care system end up homeless or just on the street. So it's amazing that you were able to create that.
Thank you.
Can you please tell us about the We Are One Foundation and what inspired you to create it?
Yeah, so I grew up in Mexico for the first 12 years of my life, where you see homeless kids all over the street basically every day. And when I moved here, you don't really see that problem anymore in front of your face, right? It's very rare that you walk around and see a homeless kid. So I'd never really thought of it to be a problem. After I started my first business, and I wasn't really passionate about what I was doing, I was trying to figure out a way to help or feel something towards my life having a purpose. And so I started volunteering at different places. I happened to go to this place called Casa, which was helping kids that are currently in foster care. And they brought 3 kids that told their stories about, the craziest things you've ever heard, from living in 14 different homes to being put on 10 different medications to getting kicked out at 18 and being put onto the street, and what they go through on a mental health basis as well, of course, going through your whole life without having anyone actually there. And so for me at that point, I think I was so passionate about being able to help someone who had no help, right? When you get older, your life and your job becomes more about what does life mean to you, and so you want your life to have some sort of meaning. And so at that time, there was my perfect balance of being able to do what I enjoy doing and also helping a kid who has no help.
That's amazing. Can you tell us what La La Land means to you?
Sure. Like I said, the name is to create this heavenly type state, right? We think that the world is in a pretty not so great place, to put it kindly, and we wanted to create a place where you walked in and it was kind of this prime example of how the world should be, right? Not only through the design and the all-white feel and how that should make you feel happy with the pops of yellow, but it was also about how people treat each other, right? How do you create this heavenly type environment in the real world to prove that the world should be a little bit better than what it is?
I see. So is there anything that you could change or do differently if you could be a high school student now?
Oh, absolutely. I think, well, for me, high school was a different scenario in the sense of I had moved around a lot before we ended up coming to the Beverly Hills School District. And so school for me, going to so many different schools, was a different experience than most have, right? Because you don't really grow up with the same kids in the same environment. What would I do differently? I would do 1,000 things differently. I was not a good person in high school. I think going through my teenage years was a tough time for me. I think I was a horrible person. I think I could have treated people a lot better, and I didn't see, for me, I think personally at that point in my life, I was so lost. I had no sense of like regard for myself or anyone else, and so I just went through life kind of doing whatever I wanted, which was a lot of stupid stuff. And so when you're going through that, you don't really think about how you treated other people or until you're out of it, right? You grow up and you go to college and you start to become an adult, and real life hits you and you start to realize how important it was how you treated other people, right? And so there isn't really an excuse of being a kid. We all have an opportunity to sit there and think about what we're doing with our lives and how we're treating people. And so I think I would have definitely changed my perspective and how I treated others.
So it seems like you're really resilient from that.
I think anything that taught me was, well, first of all, for me, it is, I think in a sense, deep down, like making up for like not being a good person when I was a kid. I think it adds to like my need to like want to like create a better place because I feel guilty a lot of the time. And so yeah, in some sense it builds resilience. I would say so.
So what do you do to take care of your mental health and physical well-being?
The mental health side for me, I think I'm not a good example to ask. I'm a little crazy. I wouldn't recommend the amount of pressure that I put on myself or work on most others. I think now more than ever, it's stacked up so much to where you realize, like, I never really thought of like the mental health side for most of my life until like more recently, to where things have gone so stressful and hard where I'm not great at handling mental health. I'll just tell myself to suck it up. So don't ask me to be the prime example on that side. What was the other part of the question?
It was
the physical.
Yes.
Obviously just going to the gym and exercising. I think before I leave the house now every morning, it's important for me to do so at home so that I at least get energized, and then I end my day at the gym to de-stress. I think for me that's probably helped a lot more recently in the mental health side to de-stress.
That's great, because especially in high school, so many kids just put so much pressure on themselves now, with like schoolwork and studying and sports. So it can be hard to balance that out.
Yeah, I think most kids in high school aren't really thinking about actual mental health and like what that means to them or what they're going through and analyzing it in a way where it'll help them. Most of them are just going through it and getting sad about things. And it's hard, even for me at this point. It's not a simple thing to like look in the mirror and talk about like what you're feeling to yourself, right? It's easy to talk about it with someone else and try to help them go through something, but when you're talking about yourself, it's not the same. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, so it's amazing that we have this Norman Aid Center here to help kids with their mental health, and like there's counselors that you can talk to as well. So
it's fantastic. Well, when I was here, there was nothing like that, and I think the more open the topic is, of course, and the more normalized it is to be talking about your feelings, obviously is so much better than what it was before.
Agreed. So I loved how you talked about how small acts of kindness can just make someone stay. Like, for example, every single day I cross the same street to get to school, and the crossing guard, his name is Alvin. He is just the nicest guy ever, and he makes my morning every single day. Like, he knows my name. He'll be like, "Hi, Remy, how are you?" And it just makes my day. Do you think that kindness is something that someone could learn, or is it something more that you're born with?
No, I mean, I think it's the answer is both, right? There's some people that were just really born that way, and they're shining that bright at every moment, and no one has to teach them anything. And I think for some, it can 100% be taught but only if you want to do it, right? Like, you're not gonna be forced to be a kind person. Like, if you wake up and you say, I want to be kind, I think you could definitely train yourself in that way to like wake up with the intent, like we talked about, to do that. But there's definitely some people that are extraordinary. They don't need to even focus on anything. That's just how they live their lives. But you're talking. What was his name?
Alvin.
Alvin. One in a million.
I love him. Yeah. Do you think that kindness can be contagious?
Absolutely. I think it's the most contagious thing in the world. I think when you feel that, for example, from Alvin, then you want to do it as well. And especially when people hear it and see it and feel like when you walk into one of our stores and the staff, all of our staff is hired and trained on spreading this or normalizing kindness. I think once you see that environment and what it cultivates, because the staff's complimenting people, the people feel good, the people are then associating with other human beings in there in a more open and free way. They might compliment someone else, and I'm sure you've gotten a compliment at some point where you felt so great and then you feel like you want to pass that on to someone. So it's probably the most contagious thing in the world, other than COVID.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Gabby Kashanian, and I'm very moved of what you had to say so far. I'm a senior peer counselor, and can you tell us a little bit about your high school experience, like at Beverly Hills High School?
Yeah, I think when I first came in, my first year, there was I forgot what the principal's name was. My first year was very crazy. Our first year was when Freshman Friday was a really bad thing, and there was no structure in the school, and so it was a free-for-all my first year. Anything would go and slide, and so my first year was definitely a very intense experience, right? When you're coming in as a freshman, there's already so much pressure coming in as a freshman, and then adding that to it where anyone could get away with anything, it was definitely probably not the best start to high school, right? Because I think one of the things so many people dismiss is how kids get treated early on is then how they're going to end up treating others as they grow through high school or even middle school, right? So when you take it as a freshman, you feel like you should then give it later, and when you're a kid, you're not really thinking about that. And so freshman year was intense. I was a kid running around doing stupid things. And then sophomore year came, there was a switch in principal and things got really strict. And so then whatever I was doing before as a stupid kid, I was then getting suspended for every other week. And then I realized I need to probably change what I'm doing. And then once I got to junior year, I think as I started to grow up and realize that I need to change how I am as a person, I realized I had to probably leave high school early, because by that point, I was too deep to change anything here, and wasn't proud of who I was during that time as a person. And as you get older, I had just turned 17 or something. I realized that it's probably not the best place to be for me anymore, right? I had to grow up and become an adult. And so, like I said before, I was not in the right state of mind, and I wasn't proud of who I was during that time and how I treated people, right? I think I took high school as not as serious as I should have, and I think I got out my teenage years of doing stupid things to understand what I needed to change in my life, right? And so it was cut short. I left before senior year. I took the CHSPE to get out of here and rush getting my life on forward. And so for me at that time, it made sense to do that so I could get serious. But yeah, during high school, it was definitely an experience that ended up actually shaping my life. Definitely, I mean, if you look at even what I've started now, it has so much to do with those experiences, right?
That's very inspiring that you had to say that, because a lot of people, when they come into high school, they think they need to figure out everything into high school, but seeing how much you've changed since high school really inspires people to see how they could move from that and learn from their past experiences.
I appreciate it. I will say this. It's great to change after high school. It's better to kind of go into high school being conscious of who you want to be as an adult, right? So right now it's especially as I have my friends' little brothers or whatever it is that are going through high school, either seniors or freshmen, it's important to think about now how you treat these other people. You're going to grow up with these people in your life, and you're going to be 25, 27, 30, 40, and these are people you're going to see. You grow up in a community, and you have to think about now how you want to represent yourself as a human being, right? So, yes, fully great for the people who made the mistakes to understand that you can change later. But even better to come into it knowing that, hey, or even if you're into it now, knowing to be conscious about how you're treating people.
And speaking of like the pressures that you went through in high school, how did you feel like fitting in with parties and like the whole like parties with like alcohol and academically?
So that culture, I think, in school has changed a lot recently, of like the parties and like kids going to clubs, which I think is crazy, and all the alcohol and drugs becoming so normalized early. As crazy as I was, for some reason, the one thing that I stayed clear from to this day is I would not get into the drugs, right? I think, to this day, I haven't even smoked weed, and that's legal now. I think it's so important to take care of our bodies and our minds, especially as you're growing up young. Like, you might make mistakes and do stupid things, but I think drugs are so out of the picture that we should have more respect for ourselves and our lives than to hurt our bodies that much. In the sense of like parties and these things, of course, for any high schooler, it's hard going through it. You're figuring yourself out. There's 100 different groups, and I think right now you guys definitely go through a lot more pressure even than before, because the alcohol and the clubbing or whatever. I mean, so I go out sometimes and see 15, 16-year-olds in places where they shouldn't be, right? And I can't imagine what kind of pressure that even adds now, right? You even look at like how intense social media is now versus what it was back then, and the pressure of like, oh, it's cool now to post that you're in a club when you're 15, 16 years old, I think is horribly damaging. So, but for me, it's at that time, as for anyone going through high school, I think you're figuring yourself out, you're figuring what you like to do and who you like to be with, but thank God I stayed clear of the damaging stuff. But as anyone should, no one should feel like upset about like figuring out who you like to hang out with or what you like to do, right? I think it's just a part of high school, and not like being upset about not being at a certain thing or getting into a certain place. I think it's also irrelevant as you grow up, and just to keep in mind while you're in high school to not put so much pressure on yourself to like have to do all these things.
Did you ever feel like if most people were like drinking or doing drugs that you had to do it to like fit in?
I actually thought the utter opposite. I thought it was not cool to do the same thing. I thought it was much cooler to say that I didn't do that, right? And so I think with that part, it just comes with a sense of like confidence of like you saying I don't like doing that, instead of feeling peer pressure to fit in with a norm that isn't you.
Your mission of like spreading kindness is so important in high school. How would you say to how you spread kindness?
I think it's actually so simple. People like to make it sound difficult. I think it's like waking up with the intent to like be kind to people, right? It's something you have to be conscious about, and once you start doing it, then it becomes subconscious, right? Like, for example, it's literally as easy as like complimenting people. I don't know if you've seen our TikTok, for example. It's like literally what we practice is we go out and we yell compliments at people on the street. For me, even now, like if I see someone's outfit that I like, or their hat, or their glasses, or their hair looks great, now it's subconscious for me to just say it out loud, right? I think most people go through their lives, and you can walk around today and probably think in your mind 20 things that you think are cool about people, and you probably do, but most people aren't raised to say it out loud, especially if it's to a stranger. And so I think it's literally just saying those things out loud, and starting with that is a huge step, right? Past that, I think there's such small things that go such a long way. Example, holding the door, or like asking someone. A huge one for me is like asking someone what floor they're going to in an elevator. It's like these small things that like prove human connection and kindness go so far now, which when you really look at it is messed up, because that's how low the standard is, right? The standard is holding a door for someone right now is so huge that it's like a huge sign of kindness. But step by step, I think right now we can wake up being conscious about, hey, I want to be kind to people today. That's who I want to be as a person. Once you start doing it, you get used to doing it, and then you also feel so much better about yourself, right? Like when you say something to someone and you see them smile and they're happy, you also feel great about it. Normally they're saying something back to you, and just that human exchange I think is so moving.
Yeah, usually when someone like smiles at me, like I smile right back because like it's very good to spread kindness. Norm and Aid didn't exist when you were in Beverly. Whenever you had to turn to someone for help, what would you do?
I don't think there was turning to anyone for help at that point. I think, that's why it's so beautiful what you guys have now to normalize that, to be able to just speak openly and freely when you're feeling a certain way. At that point, we didn't have stuff like that, which was probably not a good place to be. At that point, you felt something or you had to just deal with it. Now you have great people and mentors to be able to take you through it.
I'm sure you remember our school motto, Today Well Lived. How do you make today well lived?
I think it embraces kind of everything we just said, right? It's about getting up with the intent of like being kind. I think that's well lived. When you wake up in the morning and you feed off of making other people happy, it's a win-win. You make yourself happy, you make people happy, and it also just like when you look at how big life is and you don't really understand how the world works, it's so nice to be able to just like ground yourself and be kind to other people and go through life together more so than like this like separated world of human beings.
I'm just going to ask a side question. Can you talk to us a little bit about how your program helps foster youth? Like what kind of work it does with them and like what career opportunities do they have after?
Absolutely. So basically the way the program works now is every flagship store, so right now we're in Houston, Dallas, and LA. Each one of those cities has a flagship that runs the program. They do an 8-week mentorship program where, so for 8 weeks, we bring on 2 new youth at each store, right? So right now, let's say 6 new youth are coming in every 8 weeks. As a part of the program, they have a youth director and they have a store manager, right? The store manager during those 8 weeks is teaching them all about physical job skills inside of the work environment. And the youth director is helping them with their like therapy, housing, or anything that they're going through personally. When they're done with the 8 weeks, they can decide whether they love working in the cafe and they want to stay with us. And so then they can choose whatever store they want to go work at. It doesn't have to be the flagship anymore. Or if not, sometimes they'll tell the youth director, for example, they'd like to work with dogs or comic books or whatever it is, and they'll help them find a job in something that they're passionate in.
We would like to thank our generous sponsors and partners, Michael J. LeBeau, Norm and Aid Peer Counselors, KBEV, and of course, we'd like to thank our listeners. Stay safe and make today well lived.